Vācā karoti karmāṇi śāpānugrahakārakaḥ. The purpose of occult in the path of self realization, with special reference to Trika Philosophy of Kashmir. Like I'm specifying it Kashmir over here because I'm referring to Shemraj. The word Vācā karoti yeah. Hello. So because I have been using some terms that are like covered in taboo, I have and the terms are more popular in Western context than in Indian context. The very first part will be explaining my position, and it's something very new. Like in academia, especially in Indian academia, we don't really address occult. In West, however, since last century and the rising of the occult traditions and the movements, we have seen the rise of occult studies and more precisely esoteric studies. Now, Amsterdam has a center for esoteric studies which specializes only in Western esotericism, and we don't have anywhere where Indian esotericism is studied, and that becomes very important. So in my introduction, I would like to see that the word occult is basically it's something that we have very bad reputation about. Like we don't really want to get into that discussion because, when someone suffers and people go to people like peers, fakirs, tantrics, aghoris seeking help. But again, that is a place when it comes that you have to go to a tantric or you have to follow certain acharas. It's not spoken of in the public. But it remains the question, when we go to someone, we at the same time presuppose that someone has something to do that I cannot do. That is to say that someone has something that is beyond my abilities or something to do with some other power which is not available to me. So this paper is basically analysis of understanding that power and how that power is invoked. Okay. So the next slide, next two slides, the next one, yeah. So what is the definition of occult? The word occult can be literally translated into Gupta Vidya. Again, the other word for it is esoteric knowledge. The next slide. What is the word esoteric knowledge? So the word esoteric comes from the Greek root esotero, meaning inner or protected or something that is kept secret. Now the word Gupta also comes from the root gup, which means to protect or to preserve. So therefore it is such a system of knowledge which is preserved or protected by a certain section of the society. And more importantly, what is it that they protect? So it can be something like nuclear codes which you don't go around telling people. It can create a lot of mess. So here, the main, before I go into what is protected, the question is, why protect knowledge in the first place? So the objection is, like we know, that knowledge should be available to all. Then why some particular knowledge should be protected by some people? Say in Srividya, which is very popular now, why should, like we have the statement like Rajyam Dehi, Shiro Dehi, Nadehi, Shoro Shakshari. So why such a preservation is made? So there is something like if someone has listened to the story in Purana, I don't remember which Upanishad, but it was that someone was given a stone's value and initially he was initiated in Pranav, he did not understand the value. So the first thing is value of the thing. So here the protected thing, let me be direct in the beginning, it is Atma Jnana. So the true value of Atma Jnana is preserved and concealed. Second, like if you try to remember Kathopanishad, Yamraj was constantly trying to allure Nachiketa into taking into things which will be ultimately decaying. But Atma Jnana was kept secret because that will make him cross death. And to cross that is to become immortal. So that knowledge is valued and protected. Second is the purpose. So it is a direct experience of self and freedom. And see, the direct experience of self and freedom is what comes in Kaulachara. The mixing of Kula and Akula. Kaulachara is, in Tantras, it is held above Vamachara and then Dakshinachara. In beginning it comes to Vedachara, Vaishnavachara, Siddhantachara, Dakshinachara. I missed something, I think. Then Kaulachara, Virachara or Vamachara, ultimately called Chara? Shaivachara or Siddhantachara? Chara? Then Kaulachara. Vamachara is above. Sorry for that. Yeah, I just mixed the sequence. So it goes above. So what is this Kaulachara? Is when you internalize this thing. So how is it internalized? Is to mix the Kula and Akula together. And that is when you manifest the freedom. So rarely does one want this freedom or swatantra that we talk about. So, yeah. So what is the purpose of this self-knowledge, or what is the purpose of this occult knowledge, is to use magic or use to manifest this freedom into creating some actions into the world. Now, magic is a term which is popularly known as stage magic, but in magic in technical terms, in West has been used in a very different technical way. And I'm using that definition by Aleister Crowley in the next slide. Please go to the next slide. See, I've marked the points. Magic is the science of understanding one's own self and one's own situation, that is the current situation. Where it is the art of applying this knowledge into action. The next one. See, and the Tantra is again that art which gets us into self-knowledge. How? The Tantra comes from the root tan, and it is taken in the sense of tanu vistare. So, tanyate vistyate jnanam anena iti tantram. So, this is the definition taken by my teacher, Professor Devabrata Sen Sharma. It basically means it denotes a class of literature which extends the boundaries of your knowledge. So initially the boundary of our knowledge is restricted within the body, and it goes beyond the body to make the entire field of our awareness into one. So what is this bound? So in Tantra, the definition of self is given as Chaitanya Mahatma. I will be defining the Swatantra later on. So I'm going into Trika. So Trika says the self not merely as consciousness. And this consciousness is intentional. Now, intentional is a term coming from phenomenology. It means to be about something. That consciousness is always about something. And this aboutness over here is Purnahamta. That is the experience of its one own self. And this aham, as Giriraj Mishraji already discussed, is containing all the possibilities. So I'm not going into these things. And because of this absolute containing of all these possibilities, it is what makes it absolutely free. So therefore, the goal of the self is ultimately to recognize this freedom. The next slide. So in the first sutra, Chaitanya Mahatma, I am taking the definition, a particular section of Shemaraja's commentary, Chetayate iti chetana, sarva jnana kriya swatantra. There is some typing mistake, please ignore that. So the self with capital is of the nature of consciousness with capital C, like it's different from the self with small c which represents arts, and capital C indicating not the brain function consciousness, but the consciousness that is over there. This is marked with absolute, so it's a text code. So the idea is to identify it and manifest the reality, and how it is done is like, let me give you an example. Go to the next one. So before going to the next section, let me just give an example to explain what is done. So when someone is taught about the more secretive parts of the Vidya, and that is where I am getting into, I am quoting from, this is from Yogini Hriday, but this kind of text is repeated everywhere. There are two sections of a tantric practice. One deals with the part where you get to know yourself. And then when one gets into the higher forms of practices, they are taught into how to perform certain rituals or certain yogic kriyas which can help you affect the world. Affect the world in a good way, bad way, that comes later, but it helps you to affect the world. One of the most popular of it is Shatkarma. Maran, Mohan, Vashikaran, Uchchatan, all these things comes over there. There is this internal action of Maran, Mohan, Vashikaran, Uchchatan, where you kill your ego, where you control your senses, all these things are there, and then it is being projected. So a doctrine must be given where the internal self, that is the self which is immanent in our experience, and the other must be established as one whole entity. Therefore, the doctrine argues that the only way this can be done is by establishing that the other is not different from the self which is experiencing as me. Like Swastik is same as the people sitting in front of me or listening to the video. So when that is established, only then can any kriya done be effective. So this is the ground. So therefore, Srinudevi Mahaguhyam, so it's kept into great secret. So because I like you, tat pritya kathayami adya gopitam visheshahata. Like there is some typing error I have written. So just ignore the typing here. Now this knowledge is basically an oral knowledge. So therefore this quote is used. Karnat karnupadeshena sampraptam avanitalam. So it is not to be, and also it's not to be revealed. Nadeyam parashishyato. Nadeyam parashishyabhyo. So it's only like from one yogini's mouth, and yogini is an established sadhak, and it goes to the other yogini's mouth. So it does not pass down in written text where anyone will be able to reveal it. So this tradition remains oral, and this tradition remains secret. Why it is not to be given is in the next one. Etat gyatva vararohe sadyah khecharatam vrajet. So there is this word of khechari mudra in Hatha Yoga, but khechari in Tantra has a very different significance altogether. There is khechari, bhuchari, gochari and all these things. Here, khechari avastha in Shiva Sutra is known as Shiva khechari. Shiva avastha is known as khechari avastha. So why this argument or the word of khechari is used? The word khechari is an indicative word, like it's like a metaphor where we say that the space is complete and it's free. Just like a bird moves freely in space, thus the accomplished yogin, in the space of his own consciousness, where the other is also being absorbed, roams freely in that Chidakasha. By roaming, it also means that he can act freely in the Chidakasha. So roaming is an action. Next one. This is from medieval book by Eliphas Levi on transcendental magic. Now this is a very interesting book. He does go into Siddhantas which is very close to Trika. 10 minutes, 5 minutes, okay. So I'm just ignoring the definition. Let's go to the next one. The sutra from Spandakarika that I have chosen says that when one has established into this, I'm not reading it out, when has established into this Spanda Tattva, that is realized that inner pulsation, is one capable of manifesting Jnana Tva Kritva Lakshana Yatastat Ipshitam Sarvam. Whatever he or she desires is capable of manifesting. I'm just ignoring the next thing, I'm saying it in short. There are a few forms how this action is done. First is in Dravya, where you use roots or herbs or something, and then you make it, give it to someone and act is done. Then there is this other class where magic is done through the power of one's own mind. Then it is done in ceremony. And then there is another which is done through entities like yakshinis, pishachinis and other entities. Now, the problem is the dravyas and the power of the own mind and the power of ceremonial magic are all insentient. So there needs to be some sort of power that runs it. However, the magic through entities is not insentient. And this is something that comes in the texts like Bhutadamara Tantra. Go into, let's go to the transcendental approach one. So, however, there is something in the Indian Shastra known as Gaurava and Laghava dosha. So if we go into the complicated things, we will have the problem of Gaurava dosha. So we choose the simpler path, which is being provided by the doctrine of Trika. And these are the sutras in Shiva Sutra from 13 to 14 in the first Annika, which basically I'm not going deeply into the sutras because I don't have much time. So when one understands this raw power, that is Ichha Shakti Uma Kumari, Kumari is basically meaning the virgin goddess, but it's also raw power, which is untamed power. Does he see Drishyam Shariram? In his own body, the whole experience is seen. Hridaya Chitta Sanghata Drishyam Swapadarshanam. So and the center of this awareness is his heart, and that's where the thought is going to be inserted to what is to be manifested. So Vitarka Atmagyanam, then he settles in the Atmagyanam. So Vitarka is actually Sattarka over here, and Lokananda Samadhi Sukham. So his nature becomes such that Lokananda is also Jagadananda, that his experience expands, and that experience actually attracts people. So Shemaraja actually quotes Chandraagama to do that. Since Shakti Shaktani Sarudotpatti, and the last sutra, Bhuta Samdhana Bhuta Prikathakatva Visharga Samghattaha. So that person becomes capable of arranging the elements through his own will. Okay, I'm going to the leaping the rejection of objectivity part, and I'm going to the main part. Just skip 2-3 ones. There is one after the next one. Yeah, this is going to the conclusive statement, the premise before that. So, I have quoted from Nitya Shoroshi Karnava in the Mangala Charana. It says, Yadakshara Mahasutra Protita Jagatrayam Brahma Nadi Katahantam Tammande Siddhamatrikam. So this is a very interesting quote, and this establishes how magic is done or how the act of a kriya is done, and how swatantra is experienced in its best form in language. So you can read the objectivity part later, but it is in language where you can move freely. Like in experience, you won't get an abstract concept, say like love or fame. If I ask you to picture fame, you really won't get it. But if I say that a person is Aishwaryavan, the language itself codifies the abstract concept of Aishwarya, or Buddhiman. The language codifies Buddhiman. Second, we can say that square circle exists. And through Vutpyatti of the person, intention of the speaker, we can establish the square circle exists, which will be logically true in language. However, in real life, you won't have an experience of square circle existing in the same point. So this is where the freedom is experienced best in language. Therefore, the manifestation of reality or the alteration of reality first happens in form of language. And then we have to go in the withdrawal form. So when one says that Vak Siddhi is done, when one says that a person is the self, or I say, may such happen, Ayushman Bhava, when you say. So the word comes in, for us, it appears that the word is coming in Vaikhari Vak. But it is not coming in Vaikhari Vak. It's actually the thing that is happening in Para Vak. And from Para, there is this strings which tie the Para into Vaikhari, as it is explained in Para Trishika. And from that string, we pull one string that is becoming Pashyanti, which is becoming one with Ichha Shakti. Thus, Aleister Crowley's quote, famous quote, do as thou wilt, and the wilt will be the law. So, this Ichha Shakti, we pick up the intention in a non-linguistic formal matter that may boon be given over him. From that intention, we have a mental image of a boon, and then finally we speak out the words. So, this entire sequence happens in language. Therefore, as I have said, the person who is one with self and the supreme individual at the will, in that state, first it is revealed in Parashakti where every possibility and impossibility exists. And only then does it come down. So in conclusion, the quote comes from Vijnana Bhairava, after entire preaching of Vijnana Bhairava, and this is where the essence of the purpose of Vijnana Bhairava's self-knowledge lies. Atrocha katham eko yukto jayate Bhairava swayam. So if anyone gets established in one of these practices, he or she becomes Bhairava, that retreats from the objective consciousness and become one with pure subjectivity and experiences the nature of doing Bharana, Ravana and Vamana. So that is to create, to sustain, to destroy, to withdraw, and is capable of doing the Panchakritya. Therefore, through his Vak, Vācā is Vak, not our spoken language, but this all force. Through that, karoti karmāṇi, from that only he manifests the karmas, including the Sat karma. śāpānugrahakārakaḥ. In conclusion, I want to point out why Shapa would come, because this power and consciousness has no morality in it, and this is the very basis of Kaula and Trikachara, that we go beyond the orders of social restrictions, which is formed in the other systems like Dakshinachara or other Achara. So you go beyond and see power in its raw form. And therefore, you just know the order, one order, that is the power of balance, that there is karmic law, there is this law, and balance is there. So when Shapa comes out from the Paravak into Pashyanti, and in one mind it comes out in the form of Shapa, it's Shapa. When Anugraha comes, it's Anugraha. So thank you, and that's it.